Well, welcome back to another amazing episode of Voices of Video. I can call it amazing because I'm the host, Mark Donnigan. Hey, we really do appreciate all of our listeners, all of our viewers, our audience coming back week after week and listening to these wonderful interviews. Today, I am joined again by Stefan Ideler from i3d.net. Stefan, welcome back to Voices of Video.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be back again.
Yeah, well, we've had some great conversations, both on this show and, of course, at various conferences and trade shows. Of which I'm going to go ahead and plug the fact that you are going to be in the NetInt VPU ecosystem booth at IBC. It's going to be amazing.
I'm looking forward to talk and meet with everyone.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, let's start this conversation with, hybrid cloud is finally arrived for video. For a long time, vendors and implementers have been talking about the benefits or even the dream of being able to flex into the cloud, maybe primarily run on-prem, in an own data center, and then flex. Sometimes the other way, run primarily in the cloud, but flex to on-prem for certain applications or use cases, but it's real and it's here. And you guys run a massive network. In fact, I think it was like 26, 28, 30 terabits per second, but now it's bigger, right?
It's already 35 plus, and every time we talk, it's already more because the demand side keeps going and going.
Yeah. Well, so let's start our conversation here. Tell us, what you guys are doing to enable hybrid cloud, because you are an infrastructure provider. So you've got an excellent perspective here. Tell us what you're doing.
Of course. So originally we come, of course, from the games industry, where we see the movement towards hybrid a little bit earlier than the general enterprise market. As many know, the past 2 years, especially the last year, you see that the games industry is under pressure. There's a lot of focus on cost, and the COVID bubble of investments has burst. So we see many game companies looking at the bottom line and then thinking, what the hell are my teams doing with the cloud? So we see this now spreading to the whole enterprise market. In a lot of the tenders that we also work with, also in the video industry, there's now more and more focus on the bottom line. So hybrid solutions using cloud for the flexibility, to which it's absolutely perfect, but then getting your costs a little bit more control with that baseline of predictable capacity that you can put in your own data centers or someone else's data center, and so on. But that's mainly in Europe in particular. We also see a strong push towards the sovereignty aspects, where many organizations are quite worried due to the current political and economic realities. So that also is a major push for hybrid and even some on-prem solutions in all of the projects and clients that we participate in the last the big change in the last 6 months, actually.
Yeah. We're hearing and seeing that as well. A lot of government regulation. We can talk about the EU, which obviously is where you are. But it's not just in the EU. It's really almost everywhere. There's quite stringent, requirements now, or at least that people are anticipating. So the sovereignty is an issue. So, Stefan, I'm going to assume that a lot of people by now have heard of i3D. They know your roots, but I don't think everybody has. So maybe you should give a little 1 minute, 2 minute, what are the roots of the company? You did mention you started in gaming, but you do a lot. It's very impressive what you built and who you power. So maybe you should let everyone know, first of all, where you come from.
So it all started around 2004 in primarily a business to consumer operation where we provided game server capacity that people could play together. Well, the games industry evolved.
2004.
Yeah, 2004.
Wow. That's like early.
Yeah, it's before there was cloud and people were a little bit talking about virtualization and you had single core processors.
Yeah. AWS was founded only in what, 2006, right?
Exactly.
So, wow, that's amazing.
And of course, the industry evolved. It turned into B2B business where the game companies and publishers wanted to take the games under their own control, including the online lifecycle. And that's how we expanded. So we see ourselves as expert in being the partner of someone who needs to scale. Games at release is always a scaling problem. You never know how the game is going to perform. So you want to work with a partner who can scale with you worldwide on all of these locations. This is now also expanded to the voice and video communications and the general entertainment industry, where we also assist with the scaling as parties like Discord, especially during the COVID days. That was some pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine Discord video traffic must have just been exploding is an understatement, I would assume.
And now we fix and solve the scaling problem in roughly 65 locations across the world with our own global network, which is, I must say, from my own perspective, one of the best networks in the world in terms of connectivity and latency. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Now, you've been doing gaming, for 20, 21, years or so now, more than 20 years. But you've been focused on video or not focused because you haven't left gaming. But you've been also powering video traffic for the same period of time and you just didn't really talk about it, or is that kind of a newer
it is something
capability?
About the last 10 years. I mean, we had some clients also in the video industry, but we didn't really actively focus on it. But now we've realized that a lot of the things which matter in gaming, good connectivity, no packet loss, stable connection, great insight to what's happening to your users within your network in terms of performance, metrics, and so on, actually also matters for people in the video and broadcasting industry. Especially if there's also interactiveness involved with the user, it becomes really important to know what's going on. Yeah.
So we're gonna get a little more technical and into the infrastructure side and talk about where you see ASICs going and the role of the GPU and CPU and all that. But I am curious though, how do you position yourself against? I'm not going to name other vendors, but let's just say I'll use in air quotes the traditional CDN, because it strikes me that obviously you are a CDN, you're a content distribution network, but there's kind of more to the story, to the package. The CDN, and then also how do you position yourself against, I'll just say, the public clouds that also you can look at them and say, well, they operate a CDN as well, and they just happen to have a whole lot of compute hanging around. So how do you position yourself, and where do people might someone want to choose i3D over one of those other, platform types?
That's a good question. To me, it's a combination of different factors. If it was purely a price discussion, then you have no right to exist, right? You need to add something that people also perceive as value that the other parties don't have or don't have as good. And in our opinion, it's a number of things. One is, of course, a resilient focus on that network quality, which was always very important for the gaming and the voice and video communications that we do, that we believe also is very important for this sector. The second component, which also originated from the gaming industry originally, is the world-class anti-DDoS services that we provide worldwide on top of our services. And the last one is definitely the support. You talk to the humans, to the engineers directly. There's no 5 layers of ticket systems. We're in a Slack channel together, directly talking to your engineers to directly give feedback of what is happening, giving insights, sharing dashboards. We're really part of your operational team. And that's so we try to make success together. And that, I believe, those three things is definitely a value perception, which I think is worth going from a traditional provider or cloud towards us. And of course, it's a bonus if you also save money, right?
Yeah.
It's
Of course. Well, it's interesting. We also work with gaming companies. In fact, that's initially how we even got introduced. There's some very large platforms that run on i3D, and they're wanting to do things with VPU. But one of the things that I think for those who come from a video background and haven't worked much around live streaming of games, so in other words, like cloud gaming, I'm not talking about like object delivery, but is that those platforms are largely bespoke, and they're yes, there's some commonality, certainly there's some architecture commonality, but I just have seen that, when you talk about needing to work with a client, work with a customer, like in the gaming world, that's just required. It's not an option that you could just bring a platform and say, here's my documentation, let us know if you have troubles.
You need to take off the glove, throw up your sleeves, and really
you have to
together.
Yeah. So I just make that point because when you say that you work very closely, with your customers, with your clients, that comes from your roots of building these, very sophisticated gaming platforms. So yeah. Well, let's talk about where, as a infrastructure operator and an infrastructure operator at massive scale, what is the role? What have you seen the role of CPU, GPU, and ASICs been? And we can keep it, of course, kind of focused more on the video processing, video encoding side, but I would like you to comment on just even the network operations side, where you're seeing, some of those technologies maybe expand.
Oh, yes. So actually, I see it on a number of layers, right? So on the network side of things, on the core routers, I mean, if you look back 20 years ago and now, there's such an evolution in chipsets, dedicated custom-baked silicon to FPGAs to also normal ASICs again, but it's always focused on dedicated resources in hardware at scale.
Yeah.
And now it's funny that we also see it in the server components happening as well. Like, you normally have your traditional network card, right? Like a gigabit, a 10 gigabit, 25 gigabit, or even 100 gig card. But in some of our services, for especially enter-DDoS, for example, we really need to go really deep into the packet layer, into the inspection layer. And for that as well, we've moved to ASICs and even some FPGA-based cards on the network side of things. Similarly, what we see in the AI offering, right? So, yes, you can go with the famous brand from NVIDIA and always buy the Ferrari for everything that you do.
Exactly.
I'm 100% it will work. It will work for sure.
Yeah.
But if your model is trained, right, and all you're going to do is inferencing, then it might make sense to go for, again, a specialized ASIC chipset who is awesome, for example, at that inferencing workload and model switching, and doesn't need all the other stuff that you're not going to use, which in turn, in theory, substantially lowers your cost per token.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing in general many components, and also of course with VPUs, you specialize certain components if it matches the workload that you do operationally the majority of the time, and then it makes a lot of sense to go with specialized chipsets.
Yeah. Is I'm curious, your choices of silicon support or actually large language model support, so we're talking here in the context of accelerators, so dedicated silicon. I know that there's a number of manufacturers out there that are focused on Llama. There's others that are optimized around Anthropic, and there's, everybody, by definition, you kind of have to pick your foundational model that you're going to accelerate, and then you build silicon for it. I'm just curious, are you seeing or hearing, more requests for any particular foundational model or technology, or do you have to support them all? And
Pretty much the latter. The latter. We have to support a lot of them. And what's really interesting for us that there are more and more chipsets which align with that idea. We say we are good with most of the models, even
mm-hmm,
small ones to some of the big ones, and we're
mm-hmm,
really good at switching them. Like,
mm-hmm,
let's say if you have an agentic workload, which
mm-hmm.
puts a certain query through multiple different models to get to the end result, I believe you're going to see more and more of these kinds of workloads. There's also another client that we work with who is active in the trust and safety space on voice moderation, and as well they have the user voice sample. It goes to different models after each other based on the complexity and flags it raised. So actually, if you can switch really quickly with your existing chipsets, you don't have to keep them running all at the same time on multiple boxes, but you can just do the whole process. So that's some of the innovations that I'm now also seeing in this space, which is
That
really
makes
interesting. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, because I am it'd be safe to say I'm dabbling in building, my own agents, and mostly to bring efficiency to common marketing tasks. So,
Yeah.
nothing like like what you're building. But even in the very, 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 very simplistic way, I learned very quickly that when you can run one model and even a particular version of that model, and really optimize the prompt and optimize it, and then you have a different model for some other function. When you bring it together, you get a really powerful, like, to me, that's where these workflows really start to become
100%.
pretty breathtaking. The foundational models are amazing by themselves. The fact that you can just write a fairly simple prompt and say, give me research on X, Y, and Z, and, go here, go here, go there. And then what you get back is a 15-page, like, incredible paper. I mean, that's amazing. But when you build these agentic workflows and you optimize, the prompts, and you apply different models, wow, it is, that's when it's like the X10 acceleration,
And it's great because you're doing this, you're already ahead of like 99.9% of the general AI users. And that is where the difference comes.
Yeah, most people are still going to ChatGPT and saying, write me a blog post. Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. Well, so, okay. So you're doing, you're running, this large network. It's a CDN, but it's much more than that, because you have compute hanging off of it. Is this built like an edge? Everybody's talking about the edge, right? So is this built like an edge network, or is it still largely consolidated into a smaller number of data centers, or what does the actual architecture look like? That's part one of the question, and then after you answer it, I'll let you know part two.
So originally, like 15 years ago, when we started building out the network, yes, you start out somewhere, right? So you start out with a concentration in
Of course.
Europe,
Yeah.
US, and one in Asia. But nowadays, in order to serve all those very demanding gamers and all those voice and video users as close as possible, it's definitely an edge network. All the 60 locations. There's a few bigger than the others, as always. You cannot avoid that.
Yeah.
But also, we want to make sure that all of them have sufficient capacity to serve the needs, and also that if one location would, for any reason, fail, natural disaster, whatever, that the impact or the blast radius is sufficiently minimized because there's so many other locations in the region. I believe that that's definitely the way forward. But what you also need, well, not in all use cases, like if it's a one-directional CDN, so if you're just watching video but there's nothing interactiveness, it's fine. But if there's interactivity, or you're in a shared room with users together, watching the stream and talking and everything, then the connections between all of those edges to each other also starts to matter. Because then you're having traffic that goes from one location to another location. And if you have no insight over it, it goes to a third party. You have no control. There can be so many things going wrong. So that's what differentiates our network a little bit more compared to a general CDN-based network which is only focused on one directional traffic.
Yeah. And I think, that's also another interesting thing about what you bring to market. This stands out in my mind, at least, is that as if cloud gaming is not hard enough, you're powering this ultra low latency gaming experience, which I guess you could say that's kind of the ultimate test of interactivity, right? Because when I move my controller, it better move on screen, and not be laggy.
Exactly, and also all the gamers know to find social media, the pitchforks. A lot of them are tech savvy enough to do a trace route, so it's not just that the or clients. No, they find us, message me on LinkedIn. It goes pretty far. So but it also always allows us to get better. Which is what I really like. For the many users, it always helps to get you to the next level.
But on top of that gameplay, though, you also have a gamer who then is, posting on social media or live streaming to Twitch or, whatever. I mean, in other words, not only do you have to keep that game session running and
game is monetization.
Yeah, exactly. So, wow, there's a lot going on. Well, part two of my question is this. How then are you guys thinking about video encoding and, video processing now that you have an edge network? Because it opens up a lot of really interesting possibilities. So how have you built or how are you building your video solution, given the fact that you have it's more than 60 pods, right?
So for us, both the GPU and also the VPU offering really enables us to make our edge offering more compelling, right? So being able to offer that close to all of the end users, and if you have an application which can benefit from a VPU, it's a no-brainer to do it. Of course, just best of GPUs, not all workloads will fit in the GPU, just like VPU, but if you have one which makes sense, it's a no-brainer. And what we're now also looking into with my team of solution architects is both GPU on demand and VPUs on demand. So you can rent flexible capacity, and when needed, you add a GPU over IP, for example, or even a VPU over IP to have that ultimate flexibility and also control of your cost and resource. Because the most expensive components of compute nowadays is, of course, that graphical or additional CPU component. And if we can enable ways for users to use it more efficiently, that widens the gap with, of course, the company.
Absolutely. So in the data center, are you using some sort of a composable technology that would allow you, to have sort of a virtual PCIe
there's
connection
that we're playing with it on the GPU side of things. There are some more mature solutions nowadays. But we see the same for the GPU over IP. It might not be the ideal solution if you want to do game streaming. I mean, that just benefits from having that card right into the box. But for AI inference and query loads, or if you just need to pass that check that you have a GPU for your build processes, for your build pipelines, I believe it makes a lot of sense. And similar for VPU workloads, I think there are definitely workloads where it would make a lot of sense to use it like this as well. And I think in the next coming years, we will see more and more dedicated component cards, as I like to tell them, which are hyper-focused in specific tasks that might benefit your application.
Amazing. Well, so it's wonderful to be an infrastructure provider, this is greatly simplified, but like we need roads, to drive the cars on, and we want those roads to be smooth. And a couple of weeks ago, I took
and everything. Yeah.
yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I took my son who's 19, and he's busy doing his thing, and I said, okay, hey, take the weekend off. You need to spend some time with your dad. So we went on a little road trip up into the mountains, get out of the heat. I'm in Arizona, so and along the way there were just amazingly smooth roads that you're cruising along 70, 75 miles an hour, got the radio going. It's like you barely hear anything. And then, all of a sudden it just, it's like, man, I felt like I was like driving over, I don't know, rocks, it's so rough. And so anyway, as an infrastructure provider, it's critical to have the smooth roads, right? But at the end of the day, people, need a car to drive on the road. And so this is the analogy is often we describe that the VPU is like an engine, and the engine, of course, goes in a car and propels the car to drive over the road, which would be like the network. But you need the car. So I'm curious how you guys are addressing or solving or thinking about as a network provider, infrastructure provider, how are you approaching this when people come and say, this is amazing, I want that smooth road, I want the wide lane, all the goodness, right, that you bring, but I need a car,
Yes.
I don't have the engineering team or the money or the time to go build it. How are you handling that? Are you doing partnerships with software ISVs that are then, deploying on i3D, or are you building it yourself, or what are you doing?
Well, I mean, if I had unlimited resources, of course, I would build it myself.
Yeah, of course. I know you're an engineer and you're a
Of
builder.
course.
So
That's a really good question. And we went through the same evolution in the games industry as well, where we know what we do best, having that solid infrastructure foundation, insights, and the details, and so on. But let's say you need a matchmaker, leaderboards, and everything. We have a number of partners that we work with very closely, and we are doing the same also now on the video and broadcasting industry. So yeah, we can give you that engine with the nice flat roads, no potholes.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the other components yourselves, we can recommend you quite a few number of partners that we trust in, work closely with, that we also with their teams on Slack to keep the lines short. We believe strongly in partnerships, and also if you're watching this and you would be interested in also joining our partner program, of course, also reach out to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Reach out to Stefan for sure. Yeah. And I asked this question because the challenge, I think, in video is that a lot of platforms were built from sort of one or two foundations, one of two foundations. One is just a collection of open source projects, of which, by now are incredibly mature, FFmpeg, X264, X265, and there's a range of other projects, but they were built that way on general purpose compute. So it worked really well on the cloud, and you have a small engineering team, and over time, maybe the team got bigger, but you build it. The problem is that you're never going to have enough engineers. I learned this early on in the industry where, I used to assume, I won't say names, but, you'd approach some very large, media and entertainment company, or a large cable company, or a large, somebody. And I approach them with a perspective of like, you have this amazing engineering team. Who am I to even try? And I remember early on learning, they look back and went, yes, it's true. We have a very good engineering team. Yes, it's true. We have hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of engineers working on our platform. However, nobody is sitting there waiting for something to do. Everybody is fully utilized and then some, and so a lot of the platforms have been built that way. Or there was sort of the jump start of like, hey, we can utilize maybe some microservices on a public cloud. And over time, those microservices became even more capable, more integrated. And eventually you sort of could just buy, maybe not 100% of what you need, but 80%. And then you buy or you engineer the other 20%.
Yeah.
So the challenge then that we run into, and this, extends to, even to like i3D, is people wake up one day and say, oh, wow, I can no longer justify, or I just simply don't have the funding for the big engineering team for my in-house solution. So what do I do? Or on the other side, it's a similar economics problem. Like my CFO has said, we've got to cut by 30% and there's just no more to cut. We need to change platforms. So
it's very hard when you're 80% relatively locked, right?
Yeah. So, so I'm curious if you have some insights, maybe even, you can share a little bit of firsthand experiences of walking alongside customers who have faced, this same dilemma. They know they need to move off of whatever their current platform is, whether it's in-house kind of custom built, or it's somebody else's platform, or it's just a third party commercial platform that's just gotten too expensive, and
Now, I think we have some great analogies for that from some recent cases we did. Okay, this was of course in the games industry, but exactly the same problem. There was of course a problem where people were having on-prem, but it was only themselves as the client, right? So the game scaling up and down left either a big overcapacity of hardware or undercapacity, and players could not join. So we actually helped them migrate towards cloud. I know it might sound strange nowadays, but do keeping in mind and helping them to migrate in an agnostic way. So you would just, for example, create containerized workloads and make sure you can place them at any cloud provider, so that you're not stuck in. We've also seen the other way around, where we see actually quite often where people went with cloud because it's extremely convenient, extremely accessible, and especially when it's small, with credits and everything.
When it's small, it's inexpensive. It really is. So, yeah.
And I don't blame anyone for that. However, as you say, when the CFO might knock on the door and like, what the hell is going on? Now we're successful, but a large part of my potential profit is directly attributed to the cloud provider. So for that, we look pragmatically. What can we do? So in the gaming sphere, with a number of solutions, we created connectivity between the cloud provider and us, either via tunnels or direct connect, and started identifying the components which are static, and we migrated those towards the bare metal infrastructure while keeping the connections to the cloud provider intact, so that infrastructure at our data center, which is only 1 millisecond away from the cloud data center, can keep talking to all the internal cloud services that it's still logged into and can work with. And this allows a piece by piece migration path to get at least a certain percentage of that 80% towards a base layer. Yes, you still have some traffic costs between the cloud data center and our data centers, but it's a start to get that CFO off your back, essentially. But it does require some trust. It requires our engineers and your engineers in that Slack channel talking pragmatically, coming up with brilliant solutions, how to make that connection.
That's right.
But I believe it's always possible.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. And, I hate to simplify it, but, where there's a will, there is a way. And, look, 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, CFOs are maybe dreaming or whispering about doing this, but it wasn't quite as urgent. and we were in maybe a little bit of a different financing phase for a lot of startups, and money was certainly cheaper. There's a whole lot of reasons why people talked about reducing costs, but it never really drove decisions. Now it is, you look at it and, it's very sad for the recent Microsoft employees, for example. Here, Microsoft is posting record profits. And yet I think they just announced, was it 10,000 job cuts or something? I mean,
a lot in the game side of things as well.
Yeah. And look, if I were a Microsoft employee, and certainly if I were affected, I'd really be scratching my head going, guys, I see the stock price. I listen to the earnings report. Like, what's going on here? But the reality is now, companies are being really brutal. And I think that's the right word, in how they're deciding where they're going to allocate capital. And, if I put my business hat on, and, look, in fact, you're a co-founder, right, of i3D? So, look, you also have to put your business hat on at times and look at decisions and say, what's economically prudent and optimal for our shareholders, for the employees that own a part of the company, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think, and I think the industry now has come to terms with this, is that cost reduction, becoming more efficient, doing more with less, is not just a phase that we're passing through. And then, we're going to be able to go back to spending money like it's nothing. This is the reality. And for those organizations who get efficient, who get, fit, who go to the gym, they're gonna thrive. They're gonna really do well.
And especially now you have this layered numbers of issues pushing this, like this.
That's right.
Interest rates, because there was too much capital invested in the games industry, a lot blew up. We see this now also happening in other industries. And then there's the AI crunch, that push for efficiency, to see if you can work more efficient using AI. And yes, there's some fluff, right? AIs cannot code a complete product. You still need diligent software engineers to double check if that's really actual good code, right? But there's so many mundane tasks that you can already automate away. So it's kind of like a triple crunch that is
right.
really cutting on people's jobs.
There's one that you didn't explicitly name, but I know that you viscerally feel, and that is, you can't get power in Europe, right? To your data centers.
I was hoping to avoid that subject, but
and by the way, I mean, I'm saying Europe, you're in the Netherlands, but it's true. I mean, you just look at, we leave politics out of, but look at what our president here in the US is talking about. I mean, it's power. We need more power. We need more power, and all kinds of debates of how we can get that power and whatever. And that's not the purpose. But the fact of the matter is, we need power to our data centers, and so that means that any efficiency gain that we can bring, operational efficiency, now I can bring in those extra GPUs, or I can bring in that extra infrastructure to expand my network. Otherwise, even if I have the money, the capital, I can't power it. Exactly. I don't have the energy.
and especially here in Europe, like in the Netherlands, they say it might be fixed. Maybe in 10 years from now, you can get some more capacity. So there's a lot of innovative thinking. Like we have some other places in Europe where, fortunately, there was a lot of power capacity left. So there's plenty of room still for us to operate, but it's starting to hurt. And that's why if you can use solutions like specialized ASIC chipsets, like the VPUs, or even the AI inference chipsets, do a task that you need for your business a lot more efficiently. Instead of buying 10 Ferraris who would consume 100x the power.
That's right.
It starts making sense, and it all adds up to the whole equation.
Yeah. It's it's a great discussion, and I really appreciate your perspective because I think also, what I've observed working in the video space for a long time, many years, is it. And I want to be careful how I say it because I don't want to imply that people didn't care about like energy consumption or environmental impact. That's not at all what I'm saying. But it's almost like the ball was passed to the network provider or to the public cloud like it's their problem, you know, and and I can recall being in conversations, not so much recently, but 5, 6 years ago, where I was involved in some technologies where one of the value propositions was, energy reduction, and you could pull it. It wasn't at that time. It was before I was working with NetInt, but it still had a similar value proposition, and people would quite candidly or sort of like off on the side say, hey, look, I can't really say this publicly, but like we just assume AWS is taking care of this. and and the fact of the matter is that the buck has to stop somewhere. you know and so now no longer can the industry sort of assume that, well, I just leave it on my public cloud to do that, because guess what, if anything, it does translate into increased cost, because if that data center provider is having a hard time getting energy, well, they've got to light up their data center somehow. That means that their costs are going to go up however they do it, which is going to get transferred along, So even setting aside the environmental concerns and all of that, it's
clear
so
impacts at work that we're seeing that both in the on-prem data centers, but also in the cloud provider networks and the cloud provider offerings, and also many SaaS and PaaS offerings. Now every year, it's way inflation plus a lot. That the prices go up with. And putting more pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a great conversation. Let's wrap it up here with this question, and it's a little bit of a crystal ball question, like forecast the future, but not really. In fact, I don't want you to forecast the future. I want you to answer the question based on kind of what you know today and what you see today. But I am curious about the mix of architectures or technologies that you think will be in i3D, let's say over the next, 2 to 3 years, but let's say like 3 years. So, there's CPU obviously for game engines rendering. The GPU is not going anywhere. And now inferencing, that's very, I think there's a huge potential to move that onto dedicated silicon. And there's probably other aspects of the AI, workflow tool chain, et cetera. And then for video processing, we have VPU. But I'm just curious, if maybe how you see those splitting out in terms of percentage,
That's a good question. If I look at percentage, and then if I look based not on the actual numbers, but in terms of value, like cost, it's more fair, I think.
Yeah.
Right now, of course, the majority is CPU and then traditional GPU.
Of course. Yeah.
What I see, definitely agree with you that, let's say 5 years from now, I would say probably at least a third is going to be inferencing chipsets.
So like accelerated, basically ASICs that are accelerating these large language model inferencing.
In my opinion, from a technology expert, I know every game server component in the next few years will start needing some local inferencing capacity because they're also going to incorporate lots of models. All your agentic models will need it, preferably where they are and preferably locally, if possible. It's going to be part of every single business process. So I think that we'll see a major growth, and people will also figure out that it needs to be cost optimized. So it doesn't need to buy the Ferraris. No, you need specialized tasks which are really, really good at just these things.
Yeah.
Similar to that, I see the same for VPUs. But in our case, also some expect more and more on the network cards as well to get a lot more intelligence there. That's mainly because of the niche that we need to protect everything against.
That's fascinating that you say so. I want to ask you for a moment to elaborate on the network card having more intelligence built in. Do you see it going all the way to even some lightweight inference engine support in the network cards? Or what sort of intelligence would be there?
So what you're saying now could be definitely the future use case. What is our current use case is that to protect everything that we have everywhere, we have locally in every single site capacity which can, within 0.1 millisecond, appear in line to all of your traffic. And then it goes through all these big networking cards and all these big Linux servers, right? But we want to then look into every single packet to make sure that your byte matching matches, the whitelisting matches, and everything else. But for that, we rely a lot on these network cards and the programmaticality of these network cards to push as much traffic from dirty traffic towards clean traffic. And that for us specifically, for our use case, is a big growing part of our infrastructure. So it might not apply to all providers or general providers, but that's why I also said in the other category on the networking side, it's probably going to evolve further, because once you have all that extremely quick specialized programmability on those network cards as well, it opens up also many other things to explore and think about. So for me, inferencing cards, ASIC dedicated inference cards, probably on number one, closely followed by VPUs. I think traditional GPUs, as in non-AI based GPUs, might be stable or decline a bit. And then if the CPUs, which of course you have the holy war between x86 and ARM. I wouldn't dare to put a bet on which will win at that point, but I think.
Do you have a lot of ARM in your network, or is it all x86? Or
so for the traditional gaming use case, it was all 86, as much gigahertz per core as you can, because we don't want to spend any time on multi-threading, and we just want to not optimize and just give me as much gigahertz.
Raw horsepower.
Exactly.
You know, so we would say American muscle, like for like if you're talking cars, you know, it's the old like 1968, you know, like terrible gas mileage, they're noisy, they pollute the environment, but you know, but they're powerful.
Yes. But also there we see a movement towards these companies also realizing, look, if I optimize this a little bit better, there's a tremendous amount of cost that I can also save, regardless if it's on cloud or on-prem. Because if I make an application more efficient, it lowers my costs per session, right?
Correct.
So that's why we're also seeing some ARM, we're seeing some applications improving their threading, and which is why I think we'll probably be having more ARM in terms of percentage ratio 5 years from now.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it is interesting that Ampere, you know, was acquired by SoftBank and rolled into ARM, which totally made sense. I mean, it was one of those like, well, is anybody surprised? But it'll be interesting
to note that the initial ARM demand to us also came because of the fact that at a certain cloud provider, their Graviton ARM range is priced a lot more interesting compared to the x86. So that drove also the initial demand to us about ARM. And and since then it's sprouted and we see it.
Well, and you know, we fully support ARM and I know we've, you know, had conversations, and I think may even be doing some work around that as well. But it's, you know, it's the architecture. I think one summary of the conversation we just had is that, first of all, I would say that network architectures not are changing, they have changed. The only question is, where are providers in the continuum of the change process? Is kind of how I would look at it. Maybe that's too simple of a view, but I don't think, and if you look at, again, earlier I used the term the traditional CDN. And that's not a derogatory thing. That's just, there's companies that have been out there delivering bits in a very traditional way that was well known, well understood for 20 years, 25 years,
Many of those use cases that might still be the best choice, right?
Exactly. And that's a very good point. It's not that, all of those applications and use cases have gone away. But the fact of the matter is, even those service providers, those video streaming services are now changing, and now they're starting to push their processing to the edge. I know of some very, very large consumer services that are really, by all rights, operating a full edge network, and it's interesting because still there's other parts of the business. It's like, oh, the edge, everybody's talking about the edge, but it doesn't really exist. It's like, no, it very much exists, and that's where things are going, so yeah, this is great. Well, I want to just conclude with this and invite all of the listeners and the viewers, for those of you that are actually watching this on video, if you're listening on a podcast platform, thank you very much. Stefan and a number of other folks from i3D will be in the NetInt VPU ecosystem booth at IBC. We're literally right in between Hall 1 and Hall 5. Very easy to find. It's quite large. There's going to be a lot of excitement there. We have a number of partners there, all talking not only about what they're doing with VPUs, but also what they're doing in general. So if you want to just talk about i3D's network, cloud, what they can do for you for cloud gaming, etc., make sure that you stop by and see them. So, Stefan, it was great having you on again. You're becoming a regular guest. That's good.
You're doing absolutely fantastic, Mark. It's always a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, good. Well, thank you again. And thank you to all the listeners. We really do value and cherish your support. If it weren't for you, we would be talking to ourselves. So thank you again. And as I like to conclude, happy encoding. And until next time, be safe, be well.